Hey TCS TV viewers, it's Dave and Evelyn from the Camera Store.
And today we're going to give you our full hands-on review of the Canon EOS R6 Mark II. Before I give you the goods on the Canon EOS R6 Mark II, I just wanted to mention two quick things. And one is just to thank our friends at Rad Studios for introducing us to this awesome space in Calgary. If you're local and you're looking for somewhere to book, definitely check out their email below in the description and contact them, because this is just an awesome, affordable space to rent for studio photography or video. And I also wanted to let you know that Dave and I work at the Camera Store. And so if you're in Canada and you're interested in buying gear, definitely check out thecamerastore.com, and also be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll get into more reviews just like this one. The Canon EOS R6 Mark II is a continuation of the EOS R lineup. We had a lot of fun with the Canon EOS R6, and this camera steps it up a couple notches.
Well, we finally have a production copy of this camera. We've had it for some time now, which has been great. So we've been able to do a portrait session with you and I. We took it to the zoo and shot some animals with it. I've been taking out and shooting ducks on the river and all kinds of stuff to really get a feel and a sense of what this camera is capable of.
Yeah, so there's a few things that we'll go over that they upgraded from the original R6. The first of all is it's a new 24 megapixel sensor. This is a full frame sensor, and it's fairly fast scanning. It's able to shoot at 40 frames per second. With
continuous autofocus. Now, it's not a backside illuminated sensor, so we'll consider things like, is rolling shutter going to be an issue, and when does it come into play?
They've also done a few different handling changes, which we're going to talk about soon, and they've improved the battery life. And so we're going to tell you about our impressions when it comes to image quality, the overall performance, and some of the video functionality.
When you first pick up the R6 Mark II, it feels really good, and that's because Canon knows how to design a camera. I find their ergonomics are fantastic.
Yeah, you've always loved the feel of a Canon
I always
camera.
have. No, I'm not going to lie about that. But for me, one of the biggest differences on a day-to-day use of this camera is the on-off switch is now in a different spot. Usually it's in the top left-hand corner. And the idea is that with Canon, you turn it on and you can leave it on. You don't have to worry about accidentally knocking it off. Now they've switched that button over to a photo and video switch instead. And now the on-off switch is close to your forefinger, but it's not conveniently on your forefinger, I'm finding. It's kind of a bit of a reach. And I think that's kind of dumb.
But again, like you do that because then you're not accidentally turning it on and off. Right?
Exactly, and they've added a lock switch to the middle part there as well. And I've got caught a couple times having it on lock, you know, so I haven't pushed it all the way over one way or the other. But overall, I like the fact that I can pick this camera with one hand and awkwardly bring my finger over and flick the camera on, and I'm ready to start shooting, and my other hand is starting to make adjustments to the zoom, for instance. So I do quite like that.
Now, I do like that you have C1 to C3 for your customizable settings on the top dial. So now you're able to do that for both photo and video. So you can use the toggle between the photo and the video mode, and then all of your customizable settings will be tuned to whatever you're doing. So I really like that feature. In terms of electronic viewfinder, they didn't change the resolution. We still have a 3.69 million dot electronic viewfinder. Good refresh rate, it's quite smooth. And because this isn't a super high resolution camera, I'm okay with this resolution EVF. The one thing that they took from the Canon EOS R3 is this optical viewfinder simulation. So if you're someone that likes shooting with a DSLR or coming from DSLR and you just are used to that experience, you can simulate what that looks like looking through and seeing the light pass through the lens. It's a very similar experience. We tried it out in the studio, and because we had some nice ambient light, we had some natural light coming from the skylight above, it worked well for us in the studio environment.
Yeah, I think the optical finder experience is kind of a trick little feature. If you want to kind of throw back to looking through an optical viewfinder, this is as close as you can get in a digital kind of world.
Now, I personally have to say that in most other situations, once you have exposure preview and you're switching over to a mirrorless camera, it's very hard to want to go back to not having exposure preview. It just makes your shooting experience so much easier. You know what you're going to get before you shoot it, and I've just really enjoyed that through the evolution of switching over to mirrorless cameras.
Oh yeah, exposure simulation is a game changer. It's one of like the founding parts of mirrorless cameras, and it's pushing more and more people to shoot manual, I notice, more than ever, because they can see what's happening and they can make adjustments right away.
In terms of the build quality of this camera, it has some good weather sealing. It feels quite durable, and it's about 10 grams lighter than the original.
How they managed to
shave, just like shave
10
a little
grams
bit
off this camera.
I don't know. Now, in terms of media, we have the same dual UHS-2 memory card slots. And I like having SD memory cards just because I have so many of them.
Well, they're a very convenient card format that
And
are
they're
reasonably
cheap.
priced. And they're fast enough now that when it comes to still photography, and this camera is a very fast camera, which we can talk a little bit about as well.
And for battery life, we were impressed to see that the battery life has been slightly improved as well. The CPA rating is 580 shots versus 510 on the original. Now we found, of course, we were shooting way more than that. That seems to be the going trend with all mirrorless cameras, is you get way more than the CPA rating. But of course, it's also great to see that you can do USB-C charging.
It's nice to have that flexibility. I mean, every shoot that we've gone out with, I make sure the battery's fully charged when we first start the shoot. But not once have I had to worry about battery life, no matter what I've shot. And I put on a ton of frames on this camera. Well, where this camera still retains the same 12 frames per second mechanical shutter, it's up to 40 frames per second now when it comes to electronic, and that's kind of insane. I thought 20 frames a second was more than enough, but I'm finding I want all of it now. I want more and faster. You know, 40 frames a second when I was shooting birds is great because those fleeting moments are great.
Yeah, especially those like tiny little birds where you get them in flight. I mean, you need almost that many frames to be able to get them with their wings up and just in flight in general.
Yeah, and so what I find is that I'm doing smaller touches to the shutter more. So I get a fleeting moment that I want to take a picture of. Why not have a few extra shots of it? Not a big deal. I am purging a lot more of my bird photos, a lot more than I used to, because I am getting a lot more, but I do like the advantage of having 40 frames per second with full continuous autofocus.
Yes, and of course, when we're shooting at this high frame rate with continuous autofocus, this is where things get kind of cool. So Canon has put in new autofocus detection. So we have more profiles than we had before. So we brought it to the zoo to see which animals it worked with, and we did a variety of everything. So we got penguins, we got all kinds of different bird species. We also were able to do giraffes. Basically all the animals that we were trying to find the eyeballs of, it worked well.
Yeah, even fish. We were able to actually track some fish, which works very well. So it's really nice to have a lot of confidence in it. And it is fantastic. I mean, it's picking the eye out, especially of humans, from like a mile away, it seems. You know?
Yeah, and then on the human side, when we were doing portraits, we found that it also did an awesome job at acquiring focus, maintaining stickiness on the eye. Now, it was kind of interesting seeing how it behaved because there was some situations where we did trick it. So I was wearing like a big poofy, fluffy hat, and we're not sure if maybe it thought it was like a cat or something, but it preferred you when I was wearing the fluffy hat.
But we did run the 85 1.2 RF lens, which is a very shallow depth of field lens. Great for portraits, it's gorgeous for that, but it really has to perform as far as autofocus goes because that depth of field is so shallow. If you're a little bit off, it certainly shows.
Yeah, now I love doing portraits with the Canon full frame cameras because the skin tones and the look of the images coming out of camera are great. Even if you're shooting JPEGs, you don't really have to tweak them a lot. I like the warmth in the skin tones, and it's just something that Canon has always done very well, and it's nice to see that that's been maintained.
So when it comes to a camera, you can have a great lens, a great autofocus system, 40 frames per second, and some improved ergonomics, but really it's the sensor which is making the image, is capturing that image, and here we have a brand new one.
Yeah, and of course it doesn't seem like a huge increase going from 20 megapixels to 24 megapixels, but I think it's kind of a nice sweet spot for a camera like this. I mean, obviously we have a sensor that's very fast scanning. It works well for shooting the 40 frames per second, but I like the image quality that comes out of it, but they're not massive files to handle. I mean, it's nice to be able to process, especially if you're doing like a longer burst or something like that. You're not dealing with like these massive files.
And this was an interesting thing with the R6 with 20 megapixels. It was kind of a tough sell because it's not that much less resolution. What it lends itself towards, though, is better high ISO performance. And I'm not really seeing a significant improvement when it comes to the high ISO, when it's not a bad thing because the R6 was a very good high ISO performing camera.
Yeah, now even when we were shooting in the zoo, sometimes we were in some pretty low light conditions, especially like in the penguin exhibit. But I thought even when we were shooting at some of the extreme ISO levels, the files look pretty clean. And again, I just think that the overall processing that happens with Canon files, and of course the RAW files as well, they're looking very good.
Yeah, now the one concern with this sensor is that it's not a backside illuminated stack sensor. So it's maybe a little bit more prone to rolling shutter. So I wasn't able to see any of it when I was shooting any kind of birds or any kind of human-powered adventure. But while I was shooting some ducks that day, there happened to be a helicopter flying over, which is a great test of this. So if you look at this helicopter shot here, you see there is slight little bit of rolling shutter with these blades blades that are rotating at like 900 RPM.
Yeah, another thing that's helping us out in the low light situations is the in-body image stabilization. So just like the predecessors, we have up to 8 stops of in-body image stabilization. And again, since you have this full frame sensor, it's good to be able to have this in-body image stabilization so you can shoot in a variety of conditions and you can do it handheld. We already talked a lot about shooting at 40 frames per second, but I definitely think that this camera is tuned for shooting a lot of fast sports, action, wildlife, things like that. And one of the cool little features that we uncovered is having this raw burst shooting and being able to pre-shoot as well. So the cool thing is when you set it in this mode, you can half press the shutter and it's basically engaged. And so once you actually deploy that shutter fully down, it's gonna give you a half second of whatever happened before you press the shutter. So if you're working with like small birds or maybe like a sport moment where you didn't quite get your timing right, it's going to give you that flexibility so that it can actually buffer those images for you and you're not going to miss the moment.
But imagine little Timmy steps up to bat. You're ready for the shot, but at 40 frames a second, great, but I'm still bursting a lot. I'm going through a lot of frames to try and get that one keeper shot. But this pre-burst is super cool because I just wait and wait, and as long as my button's halfway depressed, and as soon as he hits the ball, I can push the button within a half a second of the event I want to capture. It's already recorded prior to that. The other cool thing is that it takes all those frames and puts it into a separate folder. So you don't have to dig through 6 billion frames to find that one keeper within that sequence.
Yeah, even when you're reviewing on the back of the camera, it's stacked in this little folder. And that's just great to see and just helps you kind of be able to organize your stuff and not have to go digging.
Yeah, I can see this feature being used more and more with those very tough, difficult shooting situations. So we're finding the R6 II is a very competent stills camera, but also as the switch in the top left-hand corner of the camera denotes, it is also a very good video camera as well.
Yes, I mean, it has the goods with it. We have the fully articulating screen, we have a headphone jack, a microphone jack, we also have the in-body image stabilization, but they've also improved a few other things when it comes to video performance. The biggest one I'd have to say is that you can now shoot oversampled 4K 60 with no crop. They've also gotten rid of the record limit in some of the lower frames rates, so if you're shooting in 24p or 30p, you can just shoot as long as your memory card and your power will allow.
Yeah, another nice little feature too is that through the USB-C connectivity, you can use this as a webcam, just plug and play.
Yes, we love that. It's been so great to see that a lot of the camera manufacturers are getting rid of the need for having like extra dongles or software and things like that to be able to use your camera as a webcam. You just plug and play, and it works great if you're doing Zoom meetings or if you're doing something like live streaming, which we do a ton of, and just having that plug and play functionality has been quite a game changer in content creation overall. I also really like that if you want to do some slow motion stuff for some creative effect, you can shoot up to 180 frames per second in HD. And the other thing is, even if you're shooting those super high frame rates, whether you're shooting in 4K or you're doing the slow-mo, the thermal management on this camera is improved over the R6.
Now 4K 60 isn't enough for you in camera, and if you want to go bigger than that, you can do 6K ProRes RAW through an external recorder like an Atomos.
Now that we've had a chance to have more time with the camera, put it through all kinds of different shooting scenarios, lots of different subjects, what are our overall impressions of this camera now that we've had some more time with it?
So overall, I have to say I really like it. I mean, bang for the buck, the price point and the category that this camera is in, it is one of the top performers, without a doubt. The 40 frames per second, I love. Actually, I never thought I'd say that. I want more. Give me all the frames per second, because you don't have to use them if you don't want, but they're there if you do. And there's moments and there's times where you're gonna find yourself wanting that extra frame rate.
Absolutely. And I think if you're someone that is a content creator and you're using it as a hybrid camera, being able to shoot in oversampled 4K 60 with no crop, I mean, that could be your deal breaker right there of which camera you're going to choose. And if you're someone that's looking between the R6 and the R6 Mark II, I think definitely the price difference between them is worth going with the Mark II. But if you're someone that owned an R6, I mean, the R6 is still a very capable camera, and I'm not sure with the resolution increase if you're going to really benefit from completely getting rid of your R6. Unless you want to have it as your second body, then it's a whole different story.
For me, I think it also depends on your subject matter. If you are shooting a lot of fast-moving subjects like airplane propellers and stuff, the R6 had a lot worse rolling shutter than the R6 II. I'm quite impressed with what it's capable of doing, even though it's not a backside illuminated stack sensor. It is capable of stopping the action very well. I had no issues at all unless I was shooting that helicopter, which just had a slight a bit of rolling shutter to
Yeah.
it.
And then on the performance side, having the new autofocus algorithms and the new profiles, I mean, that is a helpful tool all in itself, depending on what you're shooting. So we were talking about when we were doing some Western stuff, we were at Julian and Bianca's place just outside the city. And when you're doing that and you're wanting to focus more on the horse instead of the rider, you are able to put it in that detection mode and really be able to stay on the subject that you are wanting to capture.
And overall, we found it was like very confidence inspiring, that autofocus. When it locked on, it didn't lose it. It was so good when the horse was riding straight towards us, completely ignoring the rider.
Yeah, no, I hate to say it, but there's not been very many things that we can criticize on the Canon EOS R6 Mark II. I know initially Dave didn't love having the on-off switch on the right-hand side of the camera, but it's grown on you, hey?
It certainly has, and it's, like I said, it's a bit of an awkward position. It's not right by your shutter like many other manufacturers have it. You have to kind of reach over in a weird way and kind of flick it on and off if you want to do it that way. But I think they did that intentionally because you are wanting to turn the camera on and off. You don't hesitate whatsoever.
Absolutely. We think this is a very solid camera all around. And if you're looking for a hybrid camera, you want something that's sort of within that mid-range full frame, then I definitely think checking out the Canon EOS R6 Mark II is a good way to go. Of course, we want to know, what are your thoughts? Is Canon checking all of your boxes with this camera? Let us know in the comments below.
Is it just me with my awkward finger on the on-off switch, or is this a really good design choice by Canon? Make sure you follow us on Instagram.
And if you're new to our channel, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so we can catch you again very soon.
Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to check out more of our recent content, click up here. And if you're a Canadian and you want to support local, check out thecamerastore.com down here.